right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Celia Schromer, and I am the Family Support Coordinator at the UC USED, and I'll get more into who I am and what I do in just a sec. But you are here for Charting a Life course. This is I'm going to take an hour of this 2.5 hours because we want to have time for questions. We want to have time for Good Lives to talk. So I'm going to really condense. This training is often as long as 3 hours, and sometimes it's split into 2 days. So we're just going to get an overview and a little bit of a taste of what it is, and we'll try to make sure that you have an opportunity to play with the tools and use those in your hands. We'll do them with kind of generic things to start with. If we have time in the back end, after we've talked about Good Life Networks, to go back and maybe have you do just a quick dive in of some things that you want to play with it personally, or I can be here to answer questions, we'll try to do that. We're going to kind of be casual since it's a small group. If I do talk quickly, please stop me if I talk too fast, and especially when I get passionate, I talk fast, and I have been told that I appear very passionate about this work. So I'm going to apologize ahead, and please just go stop. Okay, so this is the commercial. This is brought to you by. So we are in a statewide effort that started July 1st. That is part of a national effort around this work and framework. Charting a Life course actually started out of something called the Stakeholders Report, and I will touch on that a little bit. But the Stakeholders Report was just that. A group of national stakeholders got together and started really talking about, with all the changes that we've experienced professionally and as families, what does it really mean to be supporting families? Not what family support is, as we know it as a service, but what does it truly mean to be supporting families, and what does that really entail? And so that conversation started at this stakeholders meeting, and from that, Missouri and a group of Missouri started what was called a community of practice, which is basically a fancy word for a conversation, and having the right people in the room for the conversation and just to see what happens. And it took me almost a year to learn that piece right there, because I kept trying to make it a thing, but it's not. It's just a conversation. So knowing that conversation happened in Missouri, and they expanded it to 5 more states. We wanted to be one of those states. That was over 5 years ago. In fact, those grants are just coming to an end. In those 5 states, we didn't get to be part of that, and so we started the work quietly in Ohio, back at the call for those grants, and actually brought the speakers in 5 years ago, and then we very quickly got onto the second grant. There are now 19 states. I just came back from a week-long opportunity to just talk to all the other states that are now in their first year of their grant, like we are. So we've been, and the grant didn't go to us, it went to DODD, they're the holder of the grant, and then there are 6 supporting families grants that are happening across the state, one of which is this work, and that's been given to both us and NYSONGR, which is the other USED, University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, that's in Columbus, if you guys have heard of that. So we are the ones that are kind of putting this work together. This is me, I'm Celia. Family support. I do support for families with disabilities from birth until aging. So I'm right now currently working with a family with a new diagnosis of a 3-week-old baby, and I'm working with a family with a 60-year-old sibling. So I do everything and anything in between, and what I tell families as I'm learning the scope of this, because my background is educational advocacy, is I tell them I'll walk this walk with you, we will learn together, but I will always answer the phone. And hopefully so far I've been able to manage that. We'll see how that goes. So this is me, and I tell you this just so you know where I came from. Very quickly, my sister Mary, she was the oldest in my family. My sister-in-law Kim, who had Down syndrome, my sister Mary had a cognitive disability. Down here is my niece Grace, and Grace will walk with her class on Saturday. And then my 4 children, but actually my 4 children were the ones that brought me to this work. We had learning issues that turned into paperwork, as I affectionately say it. And we are living this life, and actually this life course framework has changed my life, because we did the proverbial, the professionals often say, fall off the cliff at 22 with my oldest, and we're trying to figure it out now that she doesn't have that kind of, the same level of support. So that's me. Okay, go ahead. So what is the framework? I'm going to do this quickly as a way for you guys to get to know each other in a small, short icebreaker. The framework, by definition, is long. I'll read it slowly, but what I want you to do is look at it and pick one phrase that sticks out to you that seems unusual, different, irritates you, frustrates you, whatever the word is. And I want you to turn to the person to your right or your left, maybe preferably someone you don't know, if we have to swap a little bit, or do a group of 3 or something. But talk a little bit about what that phrase is and why it appeals to you. So very quickly, the Life Course Framework was created by families to help individuals and families of all abilities and all ages develop a vision for a good life. Think about what they need to know and do, identify how to find or develop supports, and discover what it takes to live the lives they want to live. So just take a second, read it one more time, and then turn and pick a phrase and have a short conversation. Jump in either way. We got an odd number over here, so pull them in, Bonnie. Yep, that's fine. Okay, just real quick, as you wrap up, I want to share with you the kind of things that you've heard or the things that you've shared yourself. So let's just start. This is always the roughest part because nobody wants to be the first one to talk. But can somebody share something they heard or something that they themselves shared about? And what we're looking at is in the definition, this is the definition of the framework. What stands out as different or frustrating or makes you happy or makes you angry. We'll open it up to that. I heard you guys talking for a little while. I'm going to put you on the spot. What kind of came out of your conversation?
We were sharing about an inclusive approach, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was all about no matter what we're saddled with in life, it was meant to be. And I heard the word God was brought into that because once again, you have to have a foundation at least of a belief in something, because we all come from different walks of life and we believe in what we believe in. But when we really sit down at the end of the day and think about it, we're truly in it together and we need each other's support.
And so what I hear you saying right now, to me, reflects on the word all. So we're saying all families. If you notice, this doesn't say with disabilities anywhere, and that was intentional. Okay, who else?
I like that it was created by families, not a system, not the department, not agencies, but by
And
families.
why do you like that?
Well, because they're the ones living it, they are going through it day to day, they can experience, what they need and identify what they think can help them and along the way versus the system putting things in place and making them fit in that peg when it doesn't actually fit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's been interesting to me as we've been growing this work, because I'm responsible for starting conversations in Southern Ohio and Northeast Ohio, and it's been really interesting to me to get families to the table and what that means and what has to happen in the room from us as professionals, and those of us that are professionals and family members, and how we have to be aware of how we wear that hat and how we have that conversation, and the room that we make for their conversation. And that's really been an important part of my facilitation, and I've grown as a facilitator to try to encourage that and make that happen. Who else?
I like the fact that it's all abilities, all ages, develop a vision for a good life. And that's so very different for everyone. But you know, identifying the supports that are needed there to help that good life development story.
And as we look at this and when we look at aging, it's going to be a very interesting universe because a lot of times, and I'll share with you in a second, my sister didn't live a full life to get into adulthood and aging. And so my parents, I don't know that, and that came with, when they handed her, and by the way, she's probably not going to live here, kind of thing, that came with that. And so we have to now know that that's not something that comes with the package, and we really have to look at what that looks like. And families are really, that's a huge piece of, and especially when parents kind of start saying, what about when it's no longer me? When, you know, we talk about not having the skill to do this or the skill to do that or needing help in our aging to do this, but what about when I, who will do anything for this person, is no longer an option of doing everything for this person? So that piece was really important. Thanks. Anybody else? Did we not hit on things people noticed? Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that I saw was the lives they want to live. As an educator, I'm in the school systems, so it's a lot of times the parents telling us what the child wants. The child's not always included in the conversation, and a lot of times they're shut down. So I think we need to start listening more to what it is the client wants.
Absolutely, and I think that it's a the only word that's coming is tender, but that's not right. But it's this spot that you're in that you want to encourage that conversation, and I think, and I'll touch on a little bit, I think that comes from families kind of pushing down their own dream for this child, because we start that from the second they're handed to us, and when we start to push that down and start to try to at least create something that's doable, and especially when we're in schools and there's so many things coming at us, that gets to be a tough spot.
And we're limited by the resources we have, so looking at developing and identifying different supports.
And then
A lot of times we say, here are the holes we've got, this is all they can do. They're a square peg, we can't fit them in it. That doesn't work.
Exactly. So that's what's exciting about this work, and is it really does give us an opportunity to look at a lot of different things. It can get a little overwhelming sometimes, and so we'll tell you, take a little piece at a time, but go ahead. So the core belief that came out of the community of practice, so if we can kind of do this sequence of the wing spread report, the community of practice, and the framework, we kind of got these three entities. The core belief that came out of the community of practice, that conversation in Missouri, was just this, that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, and play in their community and pursue their own life aspirations. And again, nowhere in that core belief does it say all people with disabilities. All people. And more, what this conversation is about is this idea that we need to assume inclusion in our conversation. That makes sense. So, really quick, we know that services and supports across time have changed. And when I got charged with this work very early on in my taking on this position, I very quickly recognized that even in my lifetime, I have a very not unusual timeline, but a telling timeline. So if you look down in the corner, that's my sister Mary. My sister Mary was born in 1950. She was the oldest of 7 children. I don't believe that if her life wouldn't have gone the way it was, there would have been 7 children. So in that, I still wanted to read the notes, I've had that happen. So in that conversation with her, or with my parents, within 9 months, my parents were told that they should hand her over and that the state and the system would take care of her. So my mother, at a very young age of 27, handed over her first child to the system. And my sister never lived at home. And they made the decisions. And one of the decisions they made was, because my mother was always so sad when she came to visit, was that she shouldn't come anymore. So my mother saw her again at 21, but that was our life. I didn't find out about her till I was 14. My sister went into special ed, so at 22 she became her legal guardian. So, I mean, just an interesting culture that wrapped around the way that things worked back then. Very quickly, 1965, that was my sister-in-law. She was born in 1965, and my in-laws were told the exact same thing. And my in-law said, absolutely not. She is coming home. And that was the first time that when I heard that, when I put that together, I went, that was a family voice. That's exactly why things changed from system and taking them over to coming home and working within the core of the family. And that's because families said no. So keep that in mind. That family voice is strong. And we said when things didn't work. So in 1998, my brother was told within the first 24 hours that Grace had Down syndrome. No one told them not to take her home. In fact, the Greater Cincinnati Down Syndrome Association came to the hospital and brought them information and said, if you need something, and if you're feeling uncomfortable or worried or scared, we are here. Again, driven by families. They said, we need this. Family-designed organizations came in and said, we're going to help you. You got this. You can do this. So again, that role of family is hugely important. 2012 is that wing spread report that I talked about, and that conversation is starting. So in my belief and in the belief of this community practice, we are at a point where we could, if we so choose, change the conversation and create transformational change. And that's kind of what we want to encourage here, is to look at this differently and talk about what we can do together. Okay. So very quickly, in that abolition of supports, another thing that came out of the community practice, this is how we all live. We are a family member inside. We are an individual inside a family, inside a community. And we all live that way. And we make decisions based on who our family is, we make decisions based on where we live, who our community members are, who influences our life. But we live in this kind of a model. So here is what happens sometimes, even with the best of intentions, when we are an individual with a disability. So we are an individual that's surrounded by services of some sort, or not, needs, and then we are within a family, within a community. But what we had to recognize, or what came out of this community practice, was that often those services and supports, though well-intended, separate us from, conflict with, or do not allow us to be full members of our family or our community. And people always ask me, well, give me an example of this. And several examples come to mind. Number one, my sister. Okay, so that was 1950, it's not now. But then we talk about schools, and one story that one of the individuals that developed this talks about is that she worked really hard to get a pair of support for her son. And that was really important, and when she made it happen, she thought she was Mama Bear, and it was a good thing, and it really made a difference in his school. But she became very aware that that pair's involvement in her son's life had an impact on how he engaged with his family, or his community of school. And very quickly, and how he engaged in his family, actually, because they had services at home and providers that helped him through his day at home. And so with all this extra help and support, which they definitely needed, they realized that at 23 that he had never spent any time alone, and he had a vision of living alone. When they started doing this work with him, he wanted to have his own apartment, he wanted to go to concerts, and she's going, I, at my age, do not want to go to a concert. And she, there were a lot of things he wanted to do, and all of a sudden they're like, he's never even been alone for a half hour by himself. And so they had some real skill building to do just because of the way this happened. And it wasn't a bad thing that it happened, and it wasn't like it was not necessary, but it happened, and it kind of got. So what they wanted to encourage is a thinking where things are more integrated, that we can offer services, and that is the goods and services that we might be provided by the eligibility system, or supports, things that we build into our lives just because we're people, our village, everything else like that, that helps us get through a day, in a way that it doesn't become a barrier or influence our interaction and our value within our own family and our value within our community. And that community, again, can be church, where we live, an interest group, whatever it is. Does that make sense? So we also know that the design of this system, I want to say out loud because I don't want people to feel like I'm critical of the system at all, that we're all part of, or the professionals in the room that are a part of. So there's lots of demands on that system that make those decisions happen. Budgets make that decision happen, political views and trends make that decision happen, what's happening with the economy and with employment and the capacity of the workplace makes that happen. So there's a lot of things. Cultures, family cultures, the demand from families that said we don't want this to look like this anymore, influences what happens and how those services are delivered. So again, we now know we're moving more towards a community-based model, and that's kind of coming out of that conversation of inclusion and getting on a broader, what does that look like? And so we have things like the home and community-based services rule and things like that are saying this has to be in the community in the same way, in the same capacity as people that aren't attached to the service system. And things like that. So that's coming out of this work, but there's lots of things that influence how it's developed. So what do we know? We know that services have to be person-centered. They have to be written and directed in a way that the individual understands it, and they have to reflect that individual's preferences and goals. And you talked a little bit about how pulling that from the parents and starting to give it to the individual, and that's a huge responsibility of the IEP team that I don't think we talk about enough, because it really has to be the individual, and there's going to be a transition of when it's what mom and dad envisioned and wanted, and when it becomes about the individual, so we have to kind of pay attention to that. So what's Ohio doing? So I kind of touched on this idea of community practice. I said, I'm now responsible for developing a conversation in southern, so southwest and southeast is how I've divided it, Ohio, around just getting people in the room and talking about it, families talking about it, professionals talking about it, how we can start identifying what already exists and things that we might think would be better in a particular community. And this happens in professional meetings and in more casual settings with families where like, if we had, or we jump in for each other as family members and create what probably by definition is a co-op, but really it was because we couldn't find a babysitter that could handle our kids, so we would do it for each other or things like that. So it's just kind of bringing all that to bear to the table, and I think that us as family members who have been doing this for a while, you meet that family member who's got a brand new diagnosis or a brand new baby, and you've got a list in your head. Oh, I got to tell her this, and I got to make sure they know this, and if they got, they got to go here, and they got to get on the waiver list, and you've got this list of things that it's information you have to pass on. So how do we make that more of a meaningful conversation that has impact and allows for questioning and out-of-the-box thinking? And that's kind of what that community of practice piece is. So we are working on that in Ohio, and I'm hoping to see that continue. So if anybody's not on my mailing list, I'll make sure you have my information. If you're on my mailing list, you're getting a lot of stuff from me. I would apologize, but I don't want to do that. But just take it for what it's worth. Come to what you were interested in. Don't come to what you're not, and just know that we're just trying to make lots of stuff available. So the two ideals are that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, and play, and pursue their aspirations, and that we are supporting individuals of all abilities, all ages to develop their vision for a good life. And that's kind of the premise of the entire framework. Now, knowing that out of their conversations came these tools that bubbled up. And they came up from lots of different conversations around lots of different things. But what they knew in this framework and in these tools that they had to take consideration of the all. And when we say all, as I talked about before, we're talking about the entire community. We're talking about employment in the community. If we don't help people in the community understand what that means, or understand that it's, how to be in a room with someone with disability. It was really interesting. I had a conversation with some family members, siblings, who were talking about the R word, when the rword.com first came in, and that whole conversation around that. And they were just talking about within their peers how they just didn't get how they didn't get that, and why that was not okay. And it was really, and I said, your family culture changed when you embraced an individual with a disability. And your family culture speaks to that not being okay. But not everybody has that experience. So when we talk about our individuals being more and more included in the community, we have to recognize that there's a lot of people that aren't mentally, or they're not prepared for that. And they need information, and they need to be reassured. There's a lot of fear based with anything that's different, or anyone that's different. And we have to recognize that. So all means all, and the conversation is across and broad. It's not just talking to our families with disability, it's not just talking to our professionals that work with individuals with disability, but we're really having this conversation with everyone. And we have to do that mindfully, because it's really easy for us to get in our small enclaves and have conversations. So that's one of my jobs, is to kind of push that. But I want to talk about the all of disability just really briefly. I know it's getting to be too much, but really quick. This statistic struck me when I saw it the first time, and it always still strikes me when I watch people's reaction. But those of you in the room who are professionals may understand that only 25% of the 100% of people with disability in the United States are attached to the service system. So that means 75% of people with disability are living with no relationship with the service system at all. Now in Ohio, we're a little different in that we have that beautiful thing called the waiting list, and we have some things that are happening that serve people that maybe don't get direct service dollars but can call and ask for support or service. So we're more in about 49% of people that are not known at all to the system, but we still have a lot of work to do. Because when we were charged with having this vision for this work, we have to and want to touch 100% of the people with disability and make sure that they know and have the ability to think in terms of their individual with disability across the life course, because the word life course is in this training intentionally, in that idea that we're not just talking about school age, we're not talking, everything doesn't stop when you're 22, but having a vision for an entire life and what that looks like. And so these folks, though, I found interesting, because the first time I saw this, I said, it's because there's not enough money. They just need to open up the purse. Because there's not enough money, and that's where we are doing this 75% a disservice, and it's not fair. But the reality is, there's a chunk of those people that may not qualify by our definitions, and we know our definitions have changed across time. But we also know that out of that 75%, there's a good number of people that choose not to. They look at it and go, you know, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't look like what I want. And we are never going to please with whatever is designed and developed and provided at 100% of the people, but we still have to think about that percentage that isn't pleased or connected to, and the decisions we make and the conversations that we have. So that's just a little tidbit of information. So why focus on supporting families? And the gist of this quote is because families are already doing it. And if we want to continue to ask for this chunk of support that they do for us as systems, when I'm talking about myself and the individual as a person within a professional within the systems, that they're already doing it. They are a huge proponent of designing what their individual with a disability, their family member's life looks like. And you know, once it got out of the realm where my sister was, where my mom just said, they are huge and they're important and they need to be supported, because if we lost this percentage of support that families get from being part of that conversation with their own family members, the system would be more taxed than it already is. So we have to pay attention to that. So what is family? In this framework, family is anybody you want it to be. Primarily anybody that the family or the individual define as family. We call that the Irish definition of family in my house. I had more aunts and uncles than I knew, and I found out in my adulthood that a good number of them were not even related to me. Because we moved here not knowing anyone. We had been in Chicago in that area for years. So my parents' parents were here, none of their siblings were here, and we were alone, and we created family. That's what they did, because they needed the connections around the fact that they had 7 kids, probably. But that was the reality. So, and it's not dependent on where you live. So you know, as systems, we've defined family as blood related. We've defined family as the guardian. We've defined family as, you know, the people within the home that live where we're talking about this individual living. And we're just simply saying with this framework, family is family, and it's defined by the individual and the family members themselves. So where do we start? Now we get to do the tool work. So now kind of wake up a little bit and shake it off. But so the best way to predict a future is to create it. And that's basically the conversation that came out of the community of practice in Missouri, was that this is all well and good, but without a vision, what are we gonna do? I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Well, the best way to start is to know where you're headed, right? And to know what you want. So really quickly, go ahead. I want you to stop and think, or give me, I won't do the big, normally we do this as a group work, but we're small and I'm limited on time. I want you to start calling out things to me that if you were describing a good life, not a good life with an individual with disability, not a good life for me momentarily, but let's go broad, and just what things have to be in a good life.
Enough money.
Money, there you go. There you go. What else?
Your health.
Health, okay, good.
Family.
Yeah?
Choices.
Purpose, yeah? What else?
Friends or connections.
Friends or connections, okay.
Choices.
Choices, very good. What else?
Fun.
Fun, okay. Do you know those answers are exactly the answers I get almost every time? Isn't that amazing? Now, I want you to stop, erase all that. You're looking at an individual with a disability that's in your life. What would be in their good life?
Same thing.
High five to you. It's no different, really. And when they fill this out, they say the same thing. But often we create something that looks different, is different, whatever. when really we're trying to get to the same place. And recognizing that our individuals with disabilities want nothing different than that puts us in a place where we can really allow that vision to expand. So the tool that we talk about a lot is the trajectory, and you have two different ways of seeing that in your material. You'll see this one. If you notice, you should have one, either you should have two, and one says individual and one says family, or you have one that has two sides. You also have this one-page profile. This one happens to be a life course profile, so it's an overall life. We have these for advocacy, we have these for education, we have these for, you can use this one for any of those things too, but the tools are available on the website, and there's lots of different ways to look at it. And I think important to say to the professionals in the room that work with as service providers, the front page is purposely designed around your person-centered planning ideas. So it really is something that we see as not, I run into this a lot, and I want to say out loud that this is not a program. This is really something to supplement what you do for whatever reasons. Our experience has been that the visual piece of this for some families and some professionals really works. But it really does underlie what you're already doing and can be used in ways that make sense for what you're already doing. It is not meant to replace what you're doing. It's not meant to redesign or have a brand new approach. It was just another way to look at it and a way to take the ideas and put them together. So, but that does come out of person-centered planning and can be tweaked. I was sharing earlier that these things can be tweaked in any way that you see necessary, and we can even help with that. So if you see here, I filled out what the most common answers are, and you got them all right. And so let's talk about a vision of what you don't want. What can't be in life for it to be considered a good life?
Isolationism.
There you go, isolation.
Restrictions.
Pardon me, restrictions, yeah,
Loneliness.
okay. No money, no home. Direct opposites of this, right? So now we know where we don't want to go, which is almost as important as knowing where we want to go and where we're headed. And I say that, and I always emphasize, because I have, right now, the age of my kids happens to hit this, that a lot of times you can't get, I'm dealing with one that's 16 and she's scared to death of the next transition, and she said, what do you want to, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, what don't you want? We could be there all day. But what she doesn't want. I'm like, well, let's start there and let's talk about what that looks like. I don't want to be too far from home. I want you to be able to come visit. Okay, then you want within how many hours? So you can bounce either way. You can start at the bottom and move up. You can move at the top and move down. I want you all to stop for a second and think about a spot on the trajectory about here where you are 13 or 14 for me. But where you're about 13 or 14 years old. And I want you just to think of grab the first moment of that age-ish that comes to your mind. First kind of picture, story, moment. You have it? Okay, I'm going to share with you mine. When the national group came in April, last April, and did this task, I had to fess up that mine was smoking my mother's green True 100s in the woods with my neighborhood friends. It was just the first thing that came to mind. But when she had us do the next work, so if you take that and you think about that for a little bit, you know that every life moment is a point on the trajectory. And it can be intentional or unintentional. It can be something that happens to us or something that we make happen. But interestingly enough, 14, you just move a little bit up the trajectory. At 14, my parents sent me away to boarding school. I wasn't in trouble. I wasn't a bad kid. And in fact, my mother looked at me and goes, oh, Patty's going to Immaculate Conception. Would you like to go there? And I went, sure. I mean, I don't care. But boy, did that change my trajectory. Because had I not gone there, I would have continued to hang out with the kids that I was in the neighborhood, and I know where they ended up. And my life would have been very different. So intentional or unintentional with that one, I give my mother more credit, probably intentional, that she sent me off and I only came home on weekends. But we know that with intentionality of those points on the trajectory, or noticing when something is taking us off the trajectory, has real power when we think about it ahead of time. So that was really why they chose the trajectory as a tool and a way to start planning and thinking about that life across the life course. So the other thing that we know and what comes out of that story is the idea that experiences create outcomes. And we have to have a vision to guide our experiences. So when we are family members of individuals with disability, part of our role is to allow them, or us, to create what that vision looks like. When my niece Grace was born, the phone call came and my brother said, we have a girl. And then he said, she has Down syndrome. Or no, yeah, he said she had Down syndrome. I said, okay. He goes, so I guess I'm not paying for the wedding. You don't know that. But he needed to regroup his vision. So that idea and that power of that vision, if he had held on to that vision, that Grace was going to live with them for the rest of their lives, not have a relationship, not have someone she loves as much or even more than her father, all those pieces, that would have changed her life dramatically. But he had to have people along the way that helped him have a different vision. And those people are the people that we call family, whether they're blood or not, to help us grow that vision. So we grow a vision. Out of the vision, we have expectations. So reality is, if I want to be a rocket scientist, there's certain expectations of a rocket scientist. I can't just be one because I want to be one. It doesn't work that way. So the reality is I have to find that vision for something that I have that I can meet the expectations or learn to meet the expectations. So I'm really bad at math, so rocket scientist was never on the table. And in fact, we had to do math at the office the other day, and I think my peers became painfully aware of how much I can't do math. I mean, they thought I was kind of kidding when I went through the story.
Well, Gina and I are really good at putting together a budget.
Yeah, well, I had to tell, my mess up on that is my graduate work, my stats professor looked at me and said, you have got to promise me you never, ever, ever do quantitative research alone. For me to pass the class, I had to come. So expectations lead to, we have to have experiences that reinforce those expectations. You know, one of these, I was at a school talking about this framework and trying to encourage them to make it part of school plans and systems and help their transition teams. And she goes, was this tool going to help me tell all these kids they can't be engineers? And I said, well, if you are through this cycle, you don't have to, it's not your job to tell them that. They'll figure that out on their own. If we create experiences that help us understand what the expectations of a role or a job or a vision are, whether that's employment or health or whatever it is, I'm going to know right away from that experience, and you're probably going to know by my behavior within that experience whether or not I have any interest in meeting that expectation. And so this cycle is truly important, and to make it intentional as we work through the trajectory of life to know whether or not we're headed where we want to head, and give ourselves permission to make mistakes, change things, risk, all those things happening within it is really important. So what we know is that life experiences and natural transitions, whether they're disability transitions or natural life transitions, become points on the trajectory. And when we start paying attention to those, think about those, and know, and this allows for a conversation that, transition planning, oh, we don't do that till 14. There's lots of things we can do before 14 that impact or start a conversation around transition planning. So if you truly have a school team that says, we don't discuss it until 14 because that's when we have to discuss it, there's so much work a family can do, conversation that a family can have, professionals can have with a family, that lead to that conversation because they're all points on the trajectory. And everything is leading to where we want to go. And then we have those intentional points that are part of the disability system or just the system of life that are going to lead us through that. Okay? So you have in front of you on paper a simple trajectory. And inside the portfolio piece is the more evolved trajectory, because this work never stops. That's why these people invent tools every other day. And the importance of this tool that I want you to know is that it takes and has us identify past experiences that we see as keeping us on our trajectory, and as important, past experiences that took us off or that had an impact on heading us more where we didn't want. And so when you looked at Ben's trajectory, when I talked about the Jane St. John, whose son had the para was down here. Not because it was a bad thing at the time, but she didn't realize that it was leading him more towards isolation, more towards loneliness, because he wasn't making true connections with his peers by just being in gym and art. And so there had to be a different conversation. And what I love about this tool within schools or in other types of professional meetings that we have with families is when a decision's being made and maybe the family and the team don't see completely eye to eye, or it's a new concept for the family to understand, or the family's trying to present an idea that maybe the team hasn't thought about, that I can look and say, can you tell me how that's going to get me here? So we're talking about lessening services or making services be pull out versus in the classroom, all those things that happen along the school trajectory, for example, and families are going, and it becomes this agitation of, I want this and you want this, and I have my reasons and they're valid, and you have your reasons and they're valid, but you can say, hey, how does that help me get there? And number one, then the school team can be mindful about where the parent's headed, and if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that it does help them get here, because we're all trying to help them get here. And if it doesn't, we can have a conversation about something that does, whether it's exactly what the family wants, but it's that whole conversation. It just takes it to a different level. Okay? So that expanded trajectory is really important. Tell me on time. After? I'm doing okay? All right, so I'm going to keep going. I want you to touch a tool, but I may not get there till after Kim is going to speak. So here's a trajectory. This is Ben's trajectory, just really quickly, so you'll want you to see samples. So typically, like we had discussed, family and friends, a girlfriend, vacations, concerts, NASCAR, tattoos. The tattoos are a great story. I won't share it. Volunteer at a fire station. So I want to talk about that one. I'm just going to walk that one through really quickly. So volunteer at a fire station. And you can see it was in things that they needed to do in the future. He had volunteered in high school. So it was one thing, that part of his day he spent, and because they consciously said future things need to be things like that. His brothers were all firefighters. The fire station was hugely important to their family culture. He originally, as a kid, he would ask what was in here, and I'm going to be a firefighter. And he's very involved, wheelchair bound, etc. But he would have told you over and over again he was going to be a firefighter. So they knew that being involved with the fire station was important. He had visited the fire station down the street where his father had worked since he was very small. So long story short, he starts volunteering at the fire station. And his provider is taking them because he's an adult now, and his parents are both working. So during his provider hours, they would take him to the fire station. And at the same time, Jane's job changed, and she was going to call the system or the office and talk to him about expanding their waiver dollars, because she all of a sudden had an extra hour, a half hour at the beginning, a half hour at the end, because her office was going to be further away. And she needed to expand those dollars. Well, in that conversation, separately, the fire chief called her and said, we really love having Ben here. He does this, he helps with this, he answers phones, he does whatever. So there's this whole conversation about it. That woman that comes with him, does she have to come? Because we don't know what to do with her. And what the reality was is Ben had a space in that fire station that had nothing to do with his disability. But the family hadn't made that switch. Ben had value in that space, and he didn't need a provider. Well, now all of a sudden, that extra waiver dollars that she needed, she didn't need, because she could rearrange. And it gave her permission to look at his day. She talks about looking for a colorful day, and I'll explain that later when I have more time. But knowing that when we do this and we start to really have conversation around it and map it out and start heading towards things, it's amazing the stories that come out of this work and what happens for families when they kind of take a charge or begin a conversation with professionals that help and support them, or non-professionals that help and support them, and get ideas about how to look at this differently. So go ahead. I'm going to skip this because I'm running out of time. I want to get to the start. Okay. All right. So really quickly, we know that 75% of the universe lives like this every day. We can go so far as to say that 25% that we work with in the disability lives in some way, shape, or form like this, and we're trying to move them towards this. We know that if we do it completely out of the eligibility system, if we try to create our trajectory completely only with the dollars and the supports that we get from the eligibility system, we are not going to get there. It's just not possible.
No, it is not.
It is not possible. Okay? So we know that's going to head us here, right? Okay? We also know that if we start to integrate, there was a slide in there about relationships. If we try to totally rely on our relationships in life to support us and carry us through and didn't have eligibility, that's not going to get us there either. We've got to come to some sort of balance of integrating the two. Okay? So that's where the integrated star came. So very quickly, if you look at the questions we asked we found 5 things that we utilize all the time whenever we have a conversation around integrating. And that is, what skills or abilities do I have that can help me fill my life with what I'm gonna do? I just use the phrase, what am I gonna do all day? And if we just look at it from that standpoint, what skills do I have, what assets do I have, what skills do I need, what don't I have? In terms of having a full life. Am I finding ways to spend time with family and friends to fill my life? Am I doing that in a connected way? One of the things we said we have to have are those connections. And am I creating relationship and developing value within those relationships with people that I care about? And that's something as simple as, I think often we worry about, our individual with a disability being thought of and receiving cards and all the things that we do for each other. But do we teach them how to do that? Do we take the time to say, I want you to make a goal this year to send birthday cards to every member of our family? On time, in the mail, snail mail. I get so excited when I get snail mail, that's not a bill. So just something like that, creating value of saying, wow, they thought of me. And that can't help but change how people look at that individual and their value. Eligibility. How can I use the supports from all these other places so that I can best utilize, and that's that whole fire station story, best utilize what I may get from the system. Community place, what places do I go in my community? Who do I spend time with? What activities do I like to do that are going to fill my life? And how do I identify those and how do I access those? And then technology. How can I use my smartphone, iPad, whatever technology I'm capable of using, whether that's assistive technology or just typical technology, in order to stay connected and be valued within my community. So that's kind of how we utilize the integrated STAR. So one thing she'll have us do is really quickly go through a morning routine. So when you think about that, I won't take the time because we're tight. Technology. I use my alarm clock or my smartphone to get up. I might listen to music or a affirmation kind of tape or whatever it is. Personal assets. I'm a morning person or I'm not. I need to be better about getting up the first time the alarm goes off, whatever those are. But what personal assets do I need to build? Relationship phase. And you can go through and just gives you a feel for how we already do this. One of the other ones I use is the idea that when you get a phone call at work and it's your 14-year-old child and they're like, yeah, it's raining, baseball practice was canceled. And you're walking into a meeting, and you're kind of like, how am I going to do this? So it becomes a problem-solving tool. So very quickly, I'm going to skip through. Very quickly, this was a situation where I got a phone call from my college-age daughter who does not have a disability. Again, these tools are beautiful. You use problem-solving in any meeting that you're in, and put whatever you're dealing with in the middle. She was dealing with an anxiety attack, and she'd never had one before. She didn't know what was happening. I came out of my very first community practice in Southern Ohio, and it was a 3-4 hour meeting, and I looked at my phone, there were 5 messages. The first one was mom, the second one was mom with 5 exclamation points, the third one was, where are you? The fourth one was, I need you, and the fifth one was, I can't breathe. And they were all within 15 minutes. And what I discovered was, it's really bad. If I'm 4.5 hours away, and you can't breathe, and I'm your go-to. So we need some problem solving. So we did. We worked through the STAR, and when she was finished, you can kind of flip through it. When she was finished, we did have and need. And what we recognized was she had no campus staff that she had a relationship with. She was in the second semester of her sophomore year, and she could name one person by name other than the current teachers that she had. So she had no adult support. Tons of people on the campus across the street, because she had a job over there, tons of friends, people under the age of 20 that were knee-deep in their own stuff. So her support system was very lacking, and she could tell by looking at the STAR under need, under relationship. So very quickly it became a visual. Then when we were talking about it, I said, okay, I want you to pick one thing you're going to do right now to change what's going on, because I can't get there, I can't be there. And she picked pet puppies. She got in her car, she drove to a pet store, and she played with puppies. And it just took her mind away from all of it. And it was something that she recognized because they brought puppies during finals the first semester. And so she had recognized that was something she really enjoyed. It helped take the stress away at the first semester. It was something because she had a car, she had access to it. But we picked one, and I said, I want you to pick something in each category, and I want you to impact it. It happened to be there was a parent event that weekend, so I was coming on Friday anyway. I said, I want you to do something out of each corner of the STAR, and we'll talk about when I got there. I came earlier. We walked through what she had done. She had developed a relationship with 2 people on campus that were adults that she told them her problem. She made a phone call to a community-based counselor. I mean, she did, and it gave her a list of things to do. It empowered her to have an impact on her own life. So you can see how when families end up in crisis, how this very quickly can empower them to start to identify the things they can control. And what they found is it helps them develop things they can control when they don't get what they need or they're waiting for what they need from the system. I need respite. Okay, I can tell you how many times I get that phone call in my job. There are very, I don't want to say there's nothing available. If you live in Butler County and a few other places, there might be, but there's very little available anymore around respite. Emergency respite, we can have that conversation, all those different things. But the reality is we're going to have to build something. What are we going to build? How are we going to do that? And who do you have in your circle? And if you don't, how are you going to develop a circle? And how are we? So we're encouraging families to look at it differently. So this, I had put in here that we could do our own star. I don't know how you guys feel about time, or if you want to put your hands on the tools and do what I put in the center, they're building a community relationship. So when we're talking about everybody being in the community and how to integrate a life, we need relationship within the community, and we could do one around that. Or we can have you guys talk, and then maybe go back to that if there's time. Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Real quick. So really, this just because I love this slide. So, okay, so we always have to keep in mind we always have to think of them in the context of the family. We always think of them in these domains. I skipped this slide, but the reality is we're always working on what we're going to do all day, how we're going to do it, who we're going to do it with, where we're going to do it, and whether or not we're going to be safe doing it, okay? And then the last is the star. Go ahead. So we'll go. Oh, there it is. And the points of the star, knowing where we can go to seek out that integration. And that's it. And then I'll do the emails later. Okay?
All yours.
Sorry, it is a lot to do in an hour. Well, because I just love you guys.
Maybe
I'm
we'll
gonna
have
do-
you, maybe we'll have you back.
There's a lot of work that can be done, and we can talk about that later.
Well, and she'll have this too, and she knows a lot.
If I can ask Celia to be my time,
Okay.
keep me on time too. So I have to throw this disclaimer out as well, and I kind of talk really fast, so if we need to slow down or there's something you'd like to ask, just tell me. My name is Kim McKinney, and I came to Good Life Networks probably, I didn't realize that I had been there involved with this for so long until the other day, conversation. So for about 7 years. But about 10 years ago, families, what Celia talked about, that family voice, got together after hearing Al Etmansky speak in Cincinnati around supports and family-driven. What does it look like when that voice is family-driven for supports around their family member or loved one with a disability? After Al spoke, families got together, and out of that came Good Life Networks. We had families that said, we want a good life for our family member, and what does that look like? And let's get together and figure out and be very mindful about what that looks like. And out of that, Good Life Networks was born.
Before they try to go on course of
Good Life, yes, right.
Long before,
But you
long
know,
before,
what is
but-
so good is the fact that,
They go first.
well, what warms my heart is the fact there are many different approaches to a good life, as everybody in here probably has. I think I heard, I don't know, a very different descriptor for everyone as to what a good life is all about. So it's great, and I think the fact that we have different ways that families can make a choice, what makes sense for me, and how can I go through this process. So that's the good news about things. But so we at Good Life do that through a series of conversations, being very mindful about the different areas of what that good life looks like. It's family driven, it's not a circus, but it's a way to get together and think about that process. So some of the things, we just completed a series of 6 conversations around being very intentional about those areas that we want to focus on and think about for a good life. So we started out with the spark. Where is that moment when you know you've met someone or you see that happen with your family member and you just click? I think we said we have shared interest. There's something that happens, so we call that spark. And how do we sort of fan that flame? What does that look like when you develop that relationship? Or what are some of the kinds of things to consider that go into that? Second thing we talked about are how do we limit ourselves from developing that relationship? What are those things that we think, well, I guess I could ask that person? What pushes us to further develop that relationship? Then we really talked about it takes courage to jump out there. When you think about it, developing relationships takes courage. Will that person accept me, for one? What do I bring to the relationship? All the things that kind of keep us from taking that step. Then we really talked about shared interests, and when we have shared interests, that tends to draw us closer together. And then sharing the dream. What is our dream for a good life? And I'm just very, very passionate about the fact that life is done better together. And we're all better when we have networks around us. And then we talked about the network itself and what do we do and what are some of the kinds of things we can put into developing that network. And since we know really all means all, and I love that you bring that out, so we look at, so when we have people in our life, our lives are full, they're rich, they're safer. And we just have a good life, have a better life that way. So that's kind of the premise of Good Life Networks and what is the undergird of the foundation for Good Life. So Linda and I are going to share the responsibility here of providing the information today. So I'm a board member on Good Life Networks. Linda's a board member. Mr. Tucker here is also a board member for Good Life.
I do what I'm told.
No.
Apparently you don't do it.
I think, can you see this? I think it might be a little bit hard to see. Another one of our board members,
What? Turn the light off?
I'll be standing up, so I'll see.
You can
Is it better?
turn another light off.
Better, really good.
Okay, and I have to give the disclaimer too. I talk too fast. My mother says I mumble. I think it's the hearing aid, but, and I get a little, when I'm passionate, I talk too fast and I trip over my tongue, so bear with me. But another one of our board members is a gentleman named Jack Peeler, and he has worked in disability world for years and years and years and years. Mostly up in Butler County, I believe.
Pretty much.
But anyway, I believe in the mid-90s, he did some research, and he spoke with 51 people with disabilities and asked them the question, who is in your life? And this graphic is the result of those interviews. And he found that of those 51 people, the average family size was 7.76 active members. So that might be immediate family, it might be, you know, nuclear family plus grandparents, whatever. But the majority, but the average was 7.6 people, people who were actively involved in their lives. Paid service, human service professionals, there were 24.39. So large group of people in their lives that were paid service people. Other people with disabilities, the average was 68. So, bunch of people. We're looking obviously here at a situation where the person is most likely in a segregated kind of a setting most of the day. This is the part that really concerns us at Good Life Networks. Friends, an average of 2.41. Other citizens, an average of 2.75. Now, these are people who are living in the community. They're spending most of their time in a segregated kind of a setting, a workshop, a special education classroom, that sort of thing, but this emptiness really concerns us. And he also noted that out of, I bet we're not plugged in. Oh,
Now you're plugged in.
Okay.
I got you.
Carry on. Okay. He also noted that of the 51 people, 9 of them had only paid human service professionals and other people with disabilities in their circle. So they had no one up here and no one down here. This is concerning. You're looking at lots of issues as far as safety and support and, you know, Is this a good life?
So as we kind of start to think about this and keeping this in mind, and we take a look at who is actually in our life, is to kind of stay within the groups we had that I think Celia, we had earlier, and to pass this around and just pass that thing out. I want you to take some time, if you're looking at that relationship map, and you'll see on the outside, thank you very much. And spend some time sort of thinking about your loved one, maybe that you're focused on, or for yourself, and take a look at who are the people that are acquaintances, that are kind of out there on the outside. Who are some of your potential allies? And then who are your direct allies, or people that support you directly? And think about that for a few minutes for yourself. And I'll give you a few minutes to do.
For the moment, ignore the lines going to the corners, and just think about who are your acquaintances, who are your potential allies, and who are your, and could you maybe talk a little bit about what those mean?
Sure, the, on the,
Don't write on your phone, right yet.
oh, thank you. Okay. So on the outside, when we think of acquaintances, these are people that we know. They may not be that directly close to us, but they're people that are known. They're kind of on the outside. Might be the person that you go to the same line at the cashier and you see that person. Might be somebody that you see rather infrequently, but when you see them, you have that recognition, oh, or a hello. So in here are some of your potential allies. So those might be maybe the people that you attend church with, people you work with, are in this potential allies. Then when you think of your allies, those are your close relationships. Maybe your best friend that you've had for years, family, your pastor. Trusted family. Your pastor.
I got a few family members out here myself.
That moved. But, so those are your very close relationships. And I sort of jumped ahead in my trying to get
That's okay,
into
I'm sorry.
the thing. So, but as we look at that now, so I'll turn it to you to see how you want to tackle it. So now, does everyone kind of feel that they have a sense of what this is representing and the different areas that we're looking at with that? Okay.
At least we on the same plane and thought. We mentioned mailman.
I mean, like the same.
Exactly, right. So where would you, kind of in that circle where you think on the,
Well, that would be someone you talk about an acquaintance
yeah,
that you would see nearly
that's kind of hard.
every other day or every day or whatever.
People at
Yeah.
church.
So like you know them, you can talk to them about them, but it would be in person.
Right. Although it's funny that you bring that up, the mailman, because I've seen and, or had people talk about maybe that's the only contact they've had or have in a day. And who've been integral, have very quickly moved from that outside acquaintance area right on into the
A
intimate.
funny little story, I live relatively close here, and a local police officer stopped by one day. I was out walking, and I guess I looked a little suspicious. I was walking in that rectangle. I got to talking to the guy, explained I just got finished with surgery, I didn't want to get too far from my house, blah, blah, blah. He drives around. One day I was out there putting up a used basketball hoop with the sand and the rock, and it was tipping over. He gets out of his car. My kids, they're like, oh, there's your friend. And I had to look at his badge and go, oh yeah, it's Officer Tucker, but you know, whatever it is. But you know, they consider that guy, he's an acquaintance. But
Yeah.
they want to put him as a potential ally. Some days it's like, oh, there he is. They want to put him in an ally. It's like, well, he's on patrol. He's doing his job. But I'm glad he's there, and he's a good acquaintance.
It is, that's a bit different story than kind of that we've been kind of seeing in the news too.
Yeah.
So that's a positive one.
I just have a comment. We talk at our meetings about relationships, and a lot of time, I mean, and I haven't pushed it this far into like the acquaintance, area, because I think when people think about, or at least my experience, when families think about relationships, they think about like kind of an ongoing, it's always like family, and maybe it's, it's mostly family or siblings or somebody that's really close, not, they may say somebody at church, but rarely, unless they have like a really committed, routine, regular relationship. And maybe it's explaining what relationships are. It's not just those, those people that are really close. It's pushing the envelope to those, the mailman or the local, I'm thinking like, I have, like going to the dry cleaners. It's the same like two clerks that are always at the dry cleaners, and they're always like, oh, hi, how you doing? Oh, I haven't seen you for a while. I mean, it's those kind of things that when you talk about relationships, I never thought about, and I know families and individuals aren't pushing it that far out, but those are,
But that's, I define that as community, right? I mean, that's your community.
Right,
When
but
you
it's-
are able to you go to the dry cleaner and they know your name and they know who you are and that's community. Your mail carrier knows who you are, I mean, that's.
Even given an example the other day.
What? Finley Market. I
Yeah,
went out to Finley
yeah.
Market
You were
and
talking
everybody,
about that.
and the vendors know who I am and they're like, hey, 'cause I'm there every Saturday. And if I'm not there, they say, where were you?
And think about it, we tend to focus on that center one. Even those of us who don't have any special needs, we focus on the center people, but a good life really is that full picture. And sometimes we do rely on those outside people. I had a period in my life about 5 years ago. I had had a period prior to that. They had a period of about 3 years where my job was it was hell. Everything was going wrong. And I was just totally stressed out. And fortunately, I was transferred to another building and life was getting better, but my stress level was still crazy, crazy high. And I would stop at this little coffee, it was literally a kiosk in a parking lot near me, for coffee every morning. I barely got to know the gentleman's name who owned it, who was there every day. But he was such a point of contact for getting my day started, that it was just because he was a friendly face. He was somebody that I knew was not going to bark at me for anything. He was going to ask me how I was, give me a good hot cup of coffee, and wish me a good day. And that was, I know that sounds silly, but he actually his business wasn't doing well, and he had to go out of retirement and go back and become a pilot again. And I missed him. All of the people in our lives do add value to our lives, and that is part of what we talk about a lot. You gave me a great segue, so I pulled up another slide here. And Celia, I think you use this too, that three-legged stool of support. You know, you cannot sit on a stool if it's only got two legs. You cannot make it work. You've got to have family. You've got to have that support. You've got to have people in the community and friends. And you've got to have that paid support if you've got some special needs that require some expertise, or, you know, take your needs beyond the level of your family. My mother is 84. She did not want me to tell you that, but my mother is 84. And hilarious. I don't know anybody who doesn't just absolutely love my mother. But she's developing some real health issues, particularly around mobility. She's healthy. She still wants to be active in her community, and she's been very active all of her life, particularly in her church community. And she's got family close by. I've got 3 brothers. We all live probably within a 10-mile radius of her. She's very fortunate in that regard. But we don't have any of this yet. And we're really beginning to struggle because we're getting more and more concerned about them being home alone. She's relying very heavily on this leg, but she doesn't want to rely on that leg because that means she has to take a walker in public, and she doesn't want to do that. You know, so all of it is important. You need all of it to keep your life in balance, both all of those and, you know, going in and out on that circle. So exactly.
I think that, can I say something?
Sure.
I think that the community is probably a really important thing. I live in a small community, and I take care of a granddaughter who is multi-handicapped. And when she first started to school, our school didn't want to take her because they felt like they couldn't handle her disabilities. And so she went to Thomas Wildey School. Mm-hmm. Well, I felt like that was just too constrained for her, so I had her put into the public school. And I can remember how the superintendent of the school came to Wildey School, and he told me, he said, your child does not need to be in public school. She needs to be in a medical institution. And then I think about the community. After she got into school, I had to force the school to buy a school bus that could accommodate her. Well, the community came up against me. You know, they thought I was just a really horrible person. They didn't know why I wanted to send my granddaughter to school. She's not going to learn anything. And I would have people come to me and tell me, you know, what different ones in the community were saying. I said, well, when they have a child that has a disability, I said, you have them come to me. I said, so that I can help them. But now, we take her out, and it's people come up to us, and they talk to her. They want to know how she is, or if she's not with me, then they'll say, well, how's April? You know. But the community, well, I think, was the hardest for me to get on board.
And I think a lot of parents feel that way, and grandparents. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about a lot. We talk about how oftentimes, you know, it's the experiences that we do have out in the community and how difficult those relationships can be. Sometimes some of that comes from us as well, and I'm not saying that that's the case for you, but sometimes it's our expectations that put those walls up, and we all have to work in both directions on getting past that.
And I think you kind of educated that community.
Yeah,
Because you
yeah,
told
obviously.
them,
Yeah.
you told them, like, you send someone else to me that has the
Yeah.
same problem that I'm going to.
And I want you to meet the person that was my biggest help, is this
Yes.
lady.
Yes. That's good.
She was my mentor,
That's good.
and now we work together.
Together they
So, you know, again, you're talking about, you have laws, and once you kind of pare it down so people can understand that she has the same rights as any other individual, then they start to get it.
Thanks for sharing that though about community.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things, that voice that you're talking about in Good Life, because you really wanted to push for to have a good life. Those are some of those conversations that focusing on. So, and hearing from what it took for someone else to do that and jump out with courage, and it's a process that takes time, and so thanks for sharing.
And she
But
became
you
an
know-
ally.
But it's also sort of, I imagine it can be a pretty painful process. And I just think that's, that it can be painful, it can be hurtful, it can be, and I can imagine, I look at these charts and I think, having those 3 legs work together is sometimes a challenge, and, I hope your conversations help sort of promote that change, but I do think the working together piece is really difficult as well.
That being very mindful in thinking about, how we're going to look at that, and, thinking together on that in a very intentional way, which is why I think the different approaches we have to looking at that, because it is very complex with many variables, but it's great.
But I do want to say that my support from DD in Clermont County is wonderful.
So we need all the pieces.
Yeah, and we really do. So what we'd like you to do now is take a look at the relationship map that you've got in front of you. What we kind of did here was we took that chart about levels of relationship and we put the 51 people chart, or a portion of it, over the top of this. And we'd like for you to look at it, you can look at it through the eyes of your own life, or through a loved one who has special needs, or someone that you really care about who has some needs. Where are their relationships falling on this chart? Do they have family support? And is that close family, or are there, lots of cousins that we barely know? So there's, perhaps some people that we could engage, possibly, but right now they're right out here. They're way out here. Service providers. Do we have service providers that we have regular contact with, or is it a revolving door kind of a situation? Other people with disabilities. Do we have close friends that we've spent a lot of time with, perhaps in school, perhaps they work with them constantly, but where are they falling in here? And other citizens. Do we have just acquaintances in the community? Do we have some potential allies, or do we have some really close friends? Just kind of maybe jot in a few names that you can think of, either, like I said, for yourself. You're thinking of one person here, but it can be you or it can be someone else. But take a few minutes to fill that out for yourself. And then we're going to have you come into a couple of small groups and compare your charts.
No, I didn't hear. Yeah,
experience life either.
Don't worry about it, right?
But the framework like this might help people.
Oh, I know.
Sort through it.
I agree, I like this, I like this school.
Yeah.
People with disabilities, look at this Chanel, Justina, Monica. There's Trish.
Would you ask for help and
We're gonna,
a need assessment, the plan, discovery tool?
we're gonna redo all of our stuff. This is on the Discovery.
Yours specifically, or
I don't know if that'll let me, because it's not gonna affect me when I can, because that's regulated. So I can't fight that. But we, that's what it's about, what tools we need to use and what is that gonna look like to help. Because they're gonna be around, because the whole district, the world, I'm trying to start doing this, but they don't, I'm sure this. So I think one of them has two edge, can we use this a lot of fun, like can we take off, like, like, we go with this material, we can rename it.
Is he ever
Yeah.
in here?
Can we there?
You think that?
I think we just need to ask. You got board members, good board members.
That's what I was thinking, because she doesn't really like us, and we're trying to figure out.
I don't think there is a, you can't,
She has a pretty nice.
I mean, because
Because I could see something for, and then we,
I wonder what, I thought Mark.
like for a needs assessment, you could easily, that we were looking at.
But I think part of the key is you're gonna have to join the conversation. and figure that out.
Celia never sleep, there's a needs assessment, specific comment assessment, in chart
Um,
it's on the
All their
website.
tools are online.
Right, and that's what she said.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, why can't this be our plan? Why should this be our plan?
Yes.
With,
I can see this.
Can I ask you a question? Are these, if we wanted to include this in like one of our planning tools that would be part of an ISP here, is that okay?
I would think so.
I mean, can we recreate that?
We're not copyrighted or anything, are we? I don't know.
Can we,
I
I
wouldn't know where to tell it.
mean, can we just use it as a part of the planning document? If we give credit, we can give credit to everybody.
Yeah, well, and it's actually. Yeah.
Two gifts that were new.
Yeah.
She's very
Yeah.
and is this, do you have this in like form that can be mailed, like email, like?
Yes, we do.
She can obtain.
Do you have it on your website?
Is it on?
It is on, it is on.
Cincy website or just
100%
the?
sure, but I'll check.
Yeah,
I'll check
and if
and
you're
see.
not, then you certainly can,
You could email,
so she can, and ask. for
email Good Life, and I'm sure,
Okay.
I'm sure that that is.
Okay.
And they all get watches or anything.
Yeah.
So, I talked a little bit earlier about the 6 conversations that we intentionally look at for this relationship development and network development. And some of that grew out of the concern that parents had to answer the question, what happens when I'm no longer here? So those things that we mentioned earlier about choice and people in your life and a good life, who will ensure that that vision happens? So part of what we do is to have that conversation around those main themes that kept coming up for families to answer that question. So a little bit of what we're going to do here as we share out some of what you thought when you did your relationship map, Linda's going to capture. So that'll just give you sort of a snapshot of what the evening looks like. We meet once a month and have a conversation around those areas and then harvest out of that some of those things like you shared that when you all worked together and thought of different things that if someone were to come and speak with you, you'd have probably make sure you look for this, and you kind of want to develop this, and this was helpful. So those are some of the kinds of things that we harvest out of those conversations. So as you've filled out your map, and you've looked at the different people that you put in different areas out there, what are the implications of a life with this pattern of a relationship? If you thought of your focus person, that's probably looks different or may look different than if you filled it out for yourself. And so what are some of the thoughts that hit you when you were filling out that relationship map? Anything that struck you? when you looked
Family's
at that?
easy. Family jumped out at me.
Family jumped out right away?
I think it was interesting to try to differentiate which family fell where. So I did it for my daughter, and to really know who would really come through for her, who might make an effort, and who might not. And really differentiating, and does she recognize that when she realizes it? And then the other thing that struck me about hers is that I don't know her friends, I mean, she doesn't have a lot of friends, but I don't know her friends real well, so it was hard for me to say, well, would they in a pinch really come through, or would they make a gesture, but, you know, where would they truly fall was hard for me to necessarily identify. And that way out in the acquaintance, and also the definition of friend. With a 23-year-old who, in the world of social media, and just with her own issues of who she would believe was her friend, I really truly believe, by my definition of a friend, that actually had a cup of coffee with him and stood in the middle of him for more than 20 minutes. Because social media has redefined it.
They're right, that's a good point
That
about
was a good
social media.
Well, and the definition of relationship too, I struggle with what that means. It's kind of the same thing as what a friend.
Because she referred to somebody even last night, she said something, a friend of mine told me this, and I'm like, well, how do you know them? She said, well, I've been on a Doctor Who chat board with them for almost 5 years. That wouldn't fall in the category of a friend of mine.
Modern day.
Right.
Modern day.
And I think that all looks different now with
Yeah,
social
it does,
media.
exactly.
Very different.
So, yeah, I guess, yeah, for me, what strikes me is really that whole, which I think you're hitting on, which is commitment. Like, who's really going to be committed? You know, I mean, so for instance, I'll just, you know, share that I take care of a fella who is a neighbor. He's a neighbor, right? And his mother in my neighborhood. And I am their primary contact person for all of these service providers. But really, as time goes by, I even question my own commitment. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So it may evolve into the fact that that's what it's going to be. I'm going to be committed, you know, and I've also sort of, I'm settling into that. But I think that there are lots of people in a community that take care of people. But when that care intensifies, that's a whole other kind of commitment that I think that's a big deal to think about when you think about community and relationships and friends. It's who's really committed. And that is the, you know, I mean, I think just from my own experience, that is a reality.
That's a beautiful example, I think, of what our conversations center around. So if we were having that conversation in Good Life, and that family were actually looking at, so who's there? Who's in that inner circle there that we can really count on? Would your name then begin to come up and surface as?
Well, so I've been thinking a lot about this with this fellow, because his mother is 82 years old, 83 years old. And so people do know him in our community, and people know them in our community. They are there, and they travel around, and they stop at various places in our community and hang out and chat and visit. And I was thinking that I probably need to go to those places, you know, because I need to find out what he does there. I mean, I know them pretty well. I sort of know, but I'm not there all the time, because when she is no longer with us,
Right.
then he still needs to be able to access those places, and I sort of need to know. Do you know what I mean?
I
that
do,
you
so
can
that's
keep him there.
sort
Is
of.
she the driver? She's still the driver?
The driver?
Yeah, I mean, how do they get?
Oh, they walk everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they walk everywhere
Okay.
in the neighborhood. Yeah, sorry, yes, and he walks those places by himself too, but he does need a lot of support. So does she. But, so I've thought a lot about that lately, like how do I start that now, which is a whole trajectory in a way, right? How do I start that now, at least so that there are other people that have knowledge of what he needs and who he is, and how he needs to access people in his community, and I don't know, it does bring that up, but I think commitment's a huge piece of it, because I think all of his community members, most of his relationships are people who run stores in the neighborhood, or, they stop and they visit, and they get coffee, but commitment is a whole other, it's a high level of commitment is a whole other thing.
Well, I can just put my papers away now, because you just beautifully just described, developing a network. And so those are those conversations that we're wanting to take a look at. So where are those places in the community? Where, what's happening there? Who are those people? What level of commitment are they willing to make to be there and be a part of that network to make sure the focus person you're talking about will have a good life and ensure that that dream stays intact?
Most of these people that, from my perspective, that on the peripheral of things, just think about the clergy, the church you go to. That, your clergyman becomes almost a family member because they always have good advice. You want feedback from them, and they do visit your home, knock on the door, feed them, of course, and they become part of that family structure. They really do. Even though they're not immediate family, but they become family also. What about the caseworker who provides a service to the individual?
Well, I think that's very true. Both of these individuals do have nursing that come in, and there's a home care waiver involved, and
Right.
I think the company that comes in, the people who come in, who are hired by this agency, are very close to them, and they are very close to these individuals. So there's a whole other thing, right? And I think there is a level of commitment there.
And don't forget that when you're thinking again about individuals that we become acquainted with, there are people who, at this late date time now, pick up your groceries and bring them home to your house. Taxi, for those who need a cab to go wherever. The clerks that you see at the checkout line, the one we mentioned earlier, the policemen, the postmen. There are a lot of support bases, if you would, on the peripheral. And there's some so close that we almost say, that's my uncle, that's my family, because those people over the years have been that support base for you. And many of them have access to information that they share with you. Because sometimes when we go into this, we're kind of blinded to what's available for services. What's available, for instance, PAWS. I think it was mentioned earlier. PAWS is a great opportunity that is there to give each family member a break. It's not a babysitting service. Some people would say it's a babysitting service. It is not. It is another mechanism that is used to show that people want to be part of that life. We understand the commitment that is needed from the community as a service to give someone a break. Because you're there, I don't want to use 24/7, because you are basically taking care of another human being. And it's like the crying baby. Sometimes moms just don't know what to do. You don't shake the baby to death. You nurture the baby along, feed the baby, change his diaper. I just changed it 5 minutes ago, but he went again. So the idea here is to make sure you have the kind of service and people providing to you care, love, underscore, and understanding. Because the person has to love this kind of work. Because you're dealing with people who just cannot take care of themselves. the majority of the time.
That's brought up a lot with the star with Family Soul. Well, I don't know if they go in relationship or if they go in eligibility. And that, because those lines get very blurry when you've got somebody that's been a provider for a really long time, and it's blurry for the provider too. And I often say, it doesn't matter where you put it, as long as you understand what you mean by it.
Right.
And so don't get lost in the tool. And then the other piece of that is, would that relationship survive if that person was no longer being paid?
Well, and I think that's a very important statement, not to get lost in the tool.
Yeah.
And
You
can
know,
they
I
go in
think-
both sections of the star?
And they
Yeah.
can, they can go wherever you want to put them. as long as you
So it
can
doesn't
be.
mean that it can only go in one,
Mhm.
it can go in multiple.
Right.
And same with you, when I started looking at this and blurring, who's gonna be an acquaintance and who's truly gonna be a potential ally? Well, they may vary depending on what they've got in their life and what they've got going on. They're gonna bounce in and out of any one of those lines. You know,
And I know we use the term spark, so I really did your start. But it's about, honestly, the support, access to services, the family, and the community. Because if you have an environment where individuals feel free and feel like they're accepted, they're not afraid to walk down the street. They don't have that stigma mindset, you know. It's all about being open, being receptive, being respected, and of course, you know, you're just there because it's all about family.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier about the respect. Respect is such a huge part of this, respecting the family, respecting the family's time, focus person's time. And then the respite that you were talking about, which kind of went beyond just respite, but that relationship development. So I think of a mom who shared her story, who lost her daughter to heroin, came to volunteer in the PAWS respite program, developed a relationship with that family, who then in turn, she thought she was serving, they actually were serving her. I think she had come to volunteer to provide respite that evening. They had begun to develop a relationship, and long story short, while she was coming from a place of losing her daughter, and they were going to a funeral, and she was able to provide that support, their relationship blossomed out of that, and it became, you know, much bigger than simply providing a service.
Can you explain what PAWS is?
PAWS is a respite program that also siblings, those that are there to volunteer, it's all volunteer, and it provides once a month an opportunity for those who have a family member with a disability, siblings, all get together to participate in some type of fun activity.
Where does that
Right,
happen?
Where
they're
does this
matched.
occur?
Butler County.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
specific to Butler County. And so it's PAWS. And Centerpoint Christian Church has been very active in that, as well as other sites. So the
I think
volunteers.
they have 3 different kinds of gatherings, I think, based on age, but it's.
Yeah, and they're matched to a volunteer specifically that works with maybe that focus person, and they have a good time. So a lot of times that provides the opportunity for parents to maybe do some things that they may not normally have the opportunity to do in terms of time. It lets siblings get out and have fun with other siblings.
But they're
Their own
kept in the
civil-
building, though. They're not outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. They go to the movies, give you a chance to take
The only
to the
thing that's
movies or
different-
dinner or something.
We have a gift of time respite program, but the only thing that's different is they each have, they match, everybody has somebody,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Well, and we
They're
don't.
matched to a volunteer.
Yeah.
So waiver based?
No,
It's all volunteer.
this is all volunteer.
And ours is essentially, we tried to get it started years ago to be like a co-op program where it kind of runs itself. Like we initially hired a coordinator, so we continue to do a fundraiser to pay that coordinator that then coordinates the service, but, you know, families kind of.
We also hire, we have contracted staff that work
Right.
there also.
Mhm.
So it is
And they
paid.
actually have
It's all
a
local
person
money.
coordinating.
We do 2 times a month, it's every other Saturday in our building at the Wildy School, and they do.
Pretty limited though, I mean, it's a maximum, we do have individuals who are eligible for our services and their siblings are allowed to come, and people also who are participating in the wraparound system.
Mhm.
But it's only 15 people is our maximum number.
And there are funding available for these types of community services.
And I think they have one person that is, or maybe two now, that are paid persons, but everyone else are
Is
volunteer.
everybody else
The
here
specific
volunteer.
training and
It's
orientation and all of that, right?
Similar program. Could have
But
brought
it's
it
the
up.
volunteer piece, I mean, that volunteer piece is really, not that we're here to talk about this exactly, but that recruiting volunteers is
The
difficult. So I'm interested in how they manage
I
that.
think the fact that they're affiliated with the church
Mm.
has a lot to do with
The center
driving
point.
my daughter
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
church.
One other thing
So
that
we
strikes me is overall is the grant that, the 6 conversations that you guys came out of the same grant,
Right.
the community practice and training program came out of. And out of that also came a program at the YMCA that was directed at families dealing with disability. It wasn't really respite because it was creating an opportunity for them to be out in public with other families, but as a family, as opposed to offering an opportunity to drop your child off and go, or your individual off. And the YMCA did that, and it was totally community-based. And so, yeah, and that was up in northern Ohio, and the hope is that it could be duplicated, allow us to go into our communities maybe and have a conversation with our YMCA and say, hey, would you like to do something similar, can we talk about it? And they really focused on their families with their younger kids, and, but really was well received and hugely attended, and so.
Mhm. I think that's what gets back to that community piece that we were talking about too, and I think what you said too, Rachel, it's more about kind of developing community.
So just to recap here, we asked, do we see any patterns and what do they mean? We talked about how important family was, that is a critical piece, but it's hard to know who we can count on. Figure out who is a friend versus who is just an acquaintance, especially when we're dealing with somebody who might have a tough time making that distinction. And decided that a big part of that picture is who is committed versus who is taken care of. And that led us into talking about service and where are the friends, where are the family, where are the service providers. They're generally in our community somewhere with questions about, is that a safe place? Is it a place where this individual is going to be respected, where I'm going to be respected? And sometimes there is a blurry line between those friends and community members and a provider. This is something that, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll finish with this first. I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent here, but one of the things I think we're experiencing right now is technology sometimes is eliminating the need for some of that interaction. It used to be, it might be very difficult to find a ride. Now we can use Uber. That could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing, because we're not necessarily interacting with the same person. Click it to get your groceries versus going to the grocery store and interacting with the cashier, the baggers, and all that kind of stuff. But serving, one of the things that I was hearing very much is serving can be a two-way street. Both people can benefit from that. This blurry line as far as the provider, one of the things that the experiences I had before I came to Good Life, and one of the things that the first time I came to a conversation, I knew I was at the right place. I had been a provider for a lady who lived in the community and was very involved in her church, and it was during that time that I was talking about earlier when my life was just a mess. And she was involved in choir, and one of my responsibilities was to take her choir practice every week. And I'd sit in the back of the room and work on my lesson plans and cry over the way my life was going while they're singing all this beautiful music, and I eventually went into the choir. Because she made sure that line stayed blurry. Somebody I really, really value in my life very much. She's been a real blessing to me. We have some videos we'd like to share with you if we have time about some experiences of some of the families that have been involved in Good Life Networks. They're also connected with Starfire. Are you folks familiar with Starfire? Yes. Our goals and their goals are very, very closely aligned. So Starfire has a wonderful,
In general, you're right.
first employee video for them that kind of has just documented some of them. Some of the ways some of us have been able to do ourselves some of the problems.
Yeah.
I can get it to Family and Children's first.
I'll give you my card.
Thank you.
And thanks for bringing that up. Because the
Oh.
information is also on the website. And children.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, the asset builders, and then also Cross Systems training.
Very sad.
Worked on a lot of force. I mean, if you could
Yes.
Did you
And I
go
went
to,
back, I've gone back all year.
did you go to the Family Connected training, like worksheet, the Resilience Project training?
Well, we were over at Focus. Yeah. Child
Oh,
Focus.
at Child Focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
And you guys were.
So, we've talked about that, developing that network. So the stories that we're going to be presenting are around 3 individuals who their parents, the individuals of the parents that we're showing are very involved with Good Life. And so they were very, very intentional about setting up those networks. And Joe's mom pretty much has been the facilitator for the conversations. So again, it's family driven. Those are the themes that Good Life came up with, those 6 conversations around what parents were identifying or family members were identifying as the key themes. So Michael's story, Michael attends Starfire, and I don't know if you're familiar with Starfire in Cincinnati, and serves the greater Cincinnati area. But so you'll hear about Michael's story and how his network developed and kind of what he's doing now. And it's even an updated version now. Michael has even branched out further.
We knew that we wanted to kind of collaborate with the Starfire and Mad Tree to put on a really great event. We've got 6 beers, so we've got 3 50 West beers, and we've got 3 of the Mad Tree beers, and then we got the beer that we all brewed together. We all met up and we brewed the Weed Eater. Michael picked the style of beer that he wanted us to brew, and it's just been fun. It's been a totally unique experience. I've got a new friend out of the deal. Michael and I have been hanging out, so we've had a lot of fun.
they've really been instrumental in planning this. I like to work and organize, but they've done such a good job, I haven't had to do much at all. It's not just about the project itself, it's about getting him connected with individuals in the community that he likes to do things with, or he will maybe have a job with these people in the, in the community. So it's really about connections with Michael.
Oops, and I got a little follow-up here on that.
Yeah, it's really awesome. My part is for the whole Matthew Brewery. For me and Chris, it's been working so hard on.
Obviously what we do here is we make beer, but it's not that hard in the community and having a crap ton of fun. Michael kind of has his hands in everything, which is nice because it kind of takes some stuff off our plate, and everything that happens here, Michael's got a personal touch on.
Matthew stuff is really good. It's all about the beer, yeah? He means he's one of the toys. I'm sure he takes after me and Chris, but I think...
Okay, he does take after us, doesn't he? That's right.
I think Michael's enjoyed the opportunity too. I think he's crafted a beer for his particular projects.
Yeah. Dan, is Mount Tree and 50 West kind of co-owned, partnered?
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure.
Oh, I thought you
Because
were all about
the
beer.
first scene was at 50 West, and the second
It might
one.
be,
They partnered in order to, it was his capstone project at Starfire. And the two breweries actually came together.
Really?
So, yeah, because there are several videos about it. And
So they're not, like, the two breweries are not co-owned or
No,
anything?
no,
They just
not at
partnered-
all,
They
but they
just did
came
for this-
together in order
for-
to
okay.
work on this capstone project. He had was it a neighbor, I believe, that was into, I'm not sure who the initial contact was,
Yes,
but
somebody
they
first
worked
met,
there,
yeah.
somebody worked there who had gotten into home brewing, and then they connected with the
I think
breweries,
that's
and
a good
then,
question.
Well,
That's what she
I
said.
kept saying, God, Andy should be here.
So it's kind of like that spark we talked about, kind of got it off.
you know, Starfire uses community connectors, people whose job it is to go out and find these connections, but, and that's, obviously that's great. Good Life is for, those of us who may not have that opportunity. I have twin stepdaughters who are not connected with the service world at all, and desperately need to be connected with their communities. They grew up in southern Brown County, and are just very, very isolated, and, so we're, as a family, we're trying to work through some of this. But let me tell you, I know about that three-legged stool, because we've only got one leg. By the time I get to the fourth video here, I'll get it.
Really, Charles? I think it was civilian. I
These people are in the storage area at Heritage Village in Vernon.
Oh my. Ready a civil war? Oh my God. Ready a civil war.
That was the storage area at Heritage Village in Cherry Woods, if any of you are familiar with that.
The names and dates, everyone always says they hate history because they had to memorize names and dates and places and battles. The living history is about, us you know, farm hands and serfs and the people that work for it. How did they do it?
If you wish to learn the future, study the past, for the past is prevalent.
This is the year 1788. Oh, look at that.
That's Jack Field. Sharp
I
guy.
think there's a tour coming, guys.
Oh my goodness, it's a giant tornado. Ready to go to the States?
Just by way of explanation real quickly, Joe, the young man who was in costume just a moment ago, is really into history. And his capstone project was a history program at Columbia Settlement, which is, there's a cemetery across the street from Lunken Airport, which is the site of the original settlements of Cincinnati. So every year they do a reenactment. I have a really funny picture of me from last year. But anyway, that's what the
Make it bigger and better now that we've had a dry run and we've got the script down. Writing of the script and doing the history was really huge undertaking for the volunteers that did that, like Linda and Emily. This project is perfect because it engages the people that are passionate about history and help connect them with Joe on an even deeper level.
This isn't my gig, okay? This is Joe's gig. But you know, for your kid, you'll do things. When I realized that the best way for Joe to make friends is to make friends with people who enjoy the same kind of things that he enjoys, then I started trying to figure out where am I going to find those kind of people. Because every time I did get Joe with another history person, and they started talking, you know, it didn't matter that he had a disability, and it didn't matter whatever their walk of life was or what they did, right? And the moment they were talking about history, and they were both excited about it, and it was like, you know, that's what friendships are built on. For Starfire, he was a bundle of problems. He was a bundle of things to fix. He was somebody to put somewhere to keep busy. And now I see, and now he's proven that he's somebody that can add to the world. He's somebody that can contribute, and he's somebody that's important. And that people love, that people want to have him in their life, and that's just. One more could you help ask for any of your children?
I choke up every time I see him. Kathy is not
I feel more good than not. Yeah.
We've all seen and hopefully experienced how volunteering can success.
I'm actually a volunteer and part of Joe's curriculum capstone committee, and it's a group of very interested people like his mom and others that want to help him be able to complete his academic project. And,
bringing history to life.
That's exactly right. And Joe is very much into interpreting history. And you want to share that with others, don't you?
You need to share with balance.
That's right.
That's how we learn, that's how I make it balance. Work with this guy,
Work with this guy.
This guy's much fun.
So many organizations, even large ones like the Freedom Center here, rely so heavily. All of our docents are volunteers. And it helps to reestablish our connection to our community. I mean, it feels very good to be a part of that as opposed to just, living among the world as opposed to living in the world. So
Someone meets Joe, and they have the same passion as him. What happens is his disability folds to the back. So the more people like Michael can come into Joe's life and bring him in to the community or the network of people who can see Joe like that, Joe's life is just going to be so rich and so full and so exciting.
Teresa shared her love of cooking with Star.
So, like I said, Starfire's goals and our goals are very, very closely aligned. Starfire is a paid provider, though. And as I said, you know, not everybody chooses to access paid providers. Some people don't have access to paid providers. So Good Life Network is trying to do this outside of service world, essentially. That's where we're coming.
So, kind of thinking about that and reflecting back on what we've talked about this
Fire
morning.
members and made several surprising discoveries along the way.
Think about what stands out for you, and we'll share that out. So kind of think about that for a few minutes. And out of all we've heard today, what stands out for you?
Connections.
People need connections.
Well, that it's possible to make those connections.
The whole thing was sparked, like, I mean, it just takes that one person, that one phone call, that one thing, whatever that could be, you know, that occurrence. I mean, it could, making this up, it could be a dog walking by, and the person goes after and tries to do something to the dog, and then someone comes out in the driveway and they start talking. You need that. It's so easy, but you don't think about it.
Perfect, that's a great example.
I think allowing families to have the vision for it, giving them permission to have the vision and empowering them to know they have the power to build it. I think we have, as a system, taught families to come to us every phase, and we'll tell them what to do next and how to do it and what we have that will help them. And I think we have to own that and step away from that and say, you have, it's kind of like Dorothy with the red shoes, you had what you needed all along. You just need to click your heels and have a picture of what it looks like and build it.
I love the unconditional love. Brian in New Jersey, my boss's son. And it was a learning experience because I used to get all the wet kisses there could be. And just that human side of embracing, Brian didn't care what you were. It was all about the love. And that he would come up and give you a big hug and a big kiss on the cheek. Wow. I sometimes sit back and I wish the world were the same way. I think it'll make us better human beings, better communities. And again, I go back to, we still all in it together.
I was just gonna say, I think the system has been so focused on health and safety that we need to have the dignity of risk to experience opportunities and you know, and just go, you know, get away from health and safety. I think we focus so much on that.
I just hate the stigma because individuals with disability, and I can understand why some families don't want to even be bothered with the system because the system comes again with an attitude that you don't belong, or they make the families jump through hoops.
We tell people what to do. We force supports on people. You need this, you need that, instead of saying, you tell me what you need and.
Well, thank goodness for these types of groups because I think we're starting to wake up to make systems work. When we make systems work, it becomes a fight for equality. It becomes a fight for doing things the right way. And hats off to Claremont County, hats off to Butler County, because it has been a growing experience for me.
I think one of the key points Celia mentioned very early on when you start talking about family support versus supporting families. It's a key piece.
Yeah. It's a mind shift.
It is. It's a mind shift.
And we can't keep having them turn to the system because it's not gonna be a full life. And they've gotta understand and empower themselves to know that they can build something. They can make those connections and they can create value. We just have to change how we look at it.
We have to count it, we have to live it, we have to be the example of it, so that our communities can be a heck of a lot more understanding. Because there's still a lot of stigma and attitudes out there about someone with a disability.
I think we'll really get to the all, and we'll really.
And we were just saying, communities don't watch out for each other like they used to. I mean, you know, people don't know their neighbors in some, neighborhoods and, I was just sharing, I had a neighbor call the other week because they hadn't seen my car moved in like 4 days and they were worried something was wrong. People don't, people aren't, neighborly with each other and the level of caring, and we need to get back, to that just in general.
I say stay steadfast, break down the barriers, because I had one of those neighbors. Every day was good morning, every evening, how are you, those kinds of things. And one Saturday, I think I got the courage or the kuyuns to walk over to him and say, wouldn't it be nice, here we are here, doing our grass, shaping everything up. I said, wouldn't it be nice if you had a heart attack and I was able to save your life? Change him. It wasn't overnight, but it changed his attitude. I don't know. Was it something about not being friendly with other people that are different? But just bringing that to his mind and focus. I say that to say, if we learn how to be steadfast and break down barriers to let people know that they can't turn our family members around with disabilities or our friends with disabilities, that they're not to be shut up, shut out, and forgotten about. So, we have to keep slugging away at the wall with our sledgehammers and break those barriers down. That's a person.
I think that's, when our communities are starting to get to that, and I think we're starting to realize, really, that's just kind of everybody. We all do better when we have a network and we have a community. So those are all things that are good for everybody. When Good Life meets the third Thursday out of the month at Glendale New Church in Glendale, if you want to look at conversations, families want to have those conversations. Janet Cleese will be coming in September, who's another thought leader around these conversations and what does it look like when we're intentional around building community. And then
When is she coming?
she's coming in September, and I think we haven't nailed down an exact date
Way at the
yet.
end, but yeah.
But
Last week in September.
save the time frame,
Yeah.
What time?
probably in September. We meet at 6:30 at Glendale New Church.
And you have a Facebook page, you said?
Right. Yeah,
Have
we
you
do.
guys ever thought about streaming that?
The
Meeting,
conversations.
the conversation?
Actually, some of the clips that you saw were from a woman who works with Starfire, who has agreed to work with Good Life, who really captures some of that. So,
And so if you go to the Facebook page, you can see some of those videos that have been.
You'll see
And
that.
also,
Even
the
on their website,
conversations get a little bit personal and a little bit emotional sometimes, and not everybody is
Wanting that to be
comfortable
shared.
with that.
Right.
So we always say at the beginning of the meeting, if you don't want to be videotaped, you don't want to be included, let Katie know. So that's why we don't
try to be respectful.
But it is really, she does do a really great job of capturing the.
Yeah, it varies, just like life. Some months it's like, oh goodness, what are we gonna put? And then the next month it may not be, or a family may take the idea and kind of let it marinate a little bit and think about it and kind of get comfortable with it, and then maybe come back, so it varies. So I appreciate your attention and, we want to.
No, I think we see a lot of crossover in our families.
Yeah, we do.
Families that
We really do.
enjoyed one or enjoyed the other, or once they've seen the training, the Good Life Network is a great first stepping point for families to start talking about how to build a trajectory, or build a star, if that's the tool they choose to use, or just, I think it's really more, for me, this whole thing is more about the framework.
Oh, yeah.
People like a trajectory, great. It's more about empowering them with the
Right.
mindset of changing and being intentional across the life course with the kind of life they want, and not waiting for the system to define the kind of life they get to have.
We also provide, and are trying to expand on providing facilitation for path and maps. We've
Right.
got a group coming through being trained to do that, so which is another, yet another format, another tool, so.
Another tool.
yeah.
And I think we saw the beauty the other day at church who, family who built a path around their daughter. And there must have been, how many people
Oh
in
my
that
gosh,
group?
there were like 40 people.
40 people that stepped up and said, yeah, I want in, I'll definitely be there, and made the commitment that you were talking about. I'll commit to take, Ann to lunch once a month.
Well, the pastor committed to taking her on
That
Shelly
was
calls.
huge. It was really a
I
beautiful.
mean, and this is, this is a young lady who's nonverbal, and, has some pretty significant needs, and it was like, it's pretty cool. They just really
Okay, what about our ongoing efforts to continuously be trained and connected to what is going on? I referenced that because of our Mr. O'Brien who was here. And I was wondering, would it be appropriate to share some of the things that we learned from that? Because he spoke at, 2 or 3 engagements.
Right.
And
well, a lot of, all of this comes from his work. This is,
I just wanted to drive it home that there's always ongoing training and development so that we can learn more, to be more engaging and be more connected, not just in Butler County. It's evident because we're here in Clarendon, to share in the wealth of information.
So I think it's the more people we have, we're better together to really think about, intentionally think about this process. We're gonna have a, more along the lines of what's gonna really work for community and really work for families.
And lastly, for me, this was a great education. I enjoyed both presentation, and I'm saying, wow.
Well, Celia makes that pretty easy to work together and collaborate and.
Well, I think we can have an impact. I think it's just getting word out and continuing, saying it out loud and bringing families along. Families will make the transformation, they'll make the push and ask for the system that they really need.
Yeah, the intent of this series is really to bring community members and families in. That mostly here today, in fact, all of us are probably, some of us are both, right, families, but all of us are somehow affiliated, with agencies and.
And the goal of Ohio is to have this work trickle down and bubble up, so it doesn't matter who we're presenting.
Which direction?
Which way is it
Yeah,
going?
yeah,
That's
as long as we're either trickling down or bubbling up, it's all good.
yeah. And Good Life is a family. It was very much founded by families, but right now, we're probably about 50-50.
That's nice.
Yeah, and like you say, a lot of us, let's face it, in this field,
Yeah.
a lot of us have family members.
Yeah.
That's what drew us to it at the beginning.
And
A lot of times, I think.
because I'm thinking of the board, Good Life Board is, I'm thinking of those.
Either,
Yeah.
And it's hard, I think as a family member who's a professional, it's hard to wear your total family hat. You just, you have a comfort with the material and you have a, not an air, but what it is, they can tell a mile away. Families that are professionals, you could, it's hard to hide, and I think we just have to own and be aware of that when we are in the universe as a family member, to try to accent our family pieces as opposed to letting our professional pieces slip out. I just had a conversation with him before we got started, the idea, that whole conversation about respect. And I said, you know, to be treated respectfully and be respected are two different things. There was a family member that was sharing with me that her experience in every time she goes to meet with their SSA, spending the first half hour bringing him up to speed for all the pieces that she's been emailing over since their last meeting, and telling him over and over again, and their comfort level, and simply saying, I haven't had time to deal with that, so bring me up to speed. And she said, when I only have an hour with them, it feels very disrespectful to have me give up a half hour of my only an hour time with them to bring them up to speed. And he's very respectful to me. I think that he would be offended if I said he was disrespectful. But when I have to give up 30 minutes to tell him things I've been telling him for a month, when we only have an hour to talk, I feel very disrespected, and she was trying to explain to me the difference. And I think that we just have to be conscious of that and really begin to recognize what it means to be supporting family. And it may simply be letting them know before they walk in the room that that's going to be a reality, and being real with them all the time.